What's up, YouTube? What's going down? So I've been spending a lot of my time in quarantine reading about the Beatles, getting all the Beatles albums, learning about their solo careers after the Beatles, learning about how they came together, learning about, how they advanced from album to album, learning about what the Beatles said in reflection about each of their songs, and just like really trying to listen and to figure out as much as possible. I really hate how it shows on these live streams how many people are watching. It goes up to like 4 or 5 or 6, and I'm like, yes, yes. And then it like drops to 2, and I'm like, no, no more validation. No, don't drop to 2. And it's dropping again. No, no. You know, I haven't done many of these. I guess it's just you have to just not look at the thing that says how many people are watching. Um, but yeah, the Beatles. The Beatles are, I would say 90% of people would agree, the best band ever, or at least the best rock and roll band ever of all time. They're the only band where they were simultaneously the best at their music and the most popular and successful. And that's like really never happened. Like, people blow up who aren't that good, and people are good who don't blow up. I mean, even like Mozart, for example, was outstanding, but he was poor his whole life. You know, while he was living, he was never that popular. And then, later on, his music became what it is from, where people gave him actually credit. Um, but the Beatles, I mean, God, they're so good. There's literally not one there's only okay, I was gonna say there's not any Beatles song that's bad. Not entirely true. There's maybe 1 or 2, but, I mean, Jesus Christ, this is the only band where there is no bad song, right? I mean, every song on every Beatles album is incredible, and if any of those songs had been on even the worst Beatles song, if it had been on someone else's record, that would have been the best song they ever did. What's cool about the Beatles now too is that you can like go on YouTube now, because I think Paul McCartney got the rights back to all his songs, and every single song is on YouTube. I wish I could play them in this podcast, but I can't because of copyright. But when I talk about a song, if you want to open up a new window and just search it in YouTube, and they're all right there. So, but yeah, God, it's like, where do you start? Where do you start when you talk about the Beatles? I mean, I guess you start with John Lennon and Paul McCartney meeting each other, and at like a club in England, and then Paul McCartney gets George Harrison on board, who John Lennon was kind of like on the fence. And then, of course, they had Pete Best as their drummer, where they and when these guys were touring before they got famous, it was insane. Like every single night they were doing shows in 1960, 1961, 1962. They would go to Germany and just 6, 7 nights a week, every night playing their songs over and over and over again for years before they got famous. I mean, their work ethic was incredible. Now, of course, you know, they were taking lots of drugs to kind of keep that they were just given uppers, to keep that energy going throughout the week, and they would take downers to go to bed. I think it was called like Preludin or something, it's like cocaine light. So they were all taking this shit, just to keep their energy up. And their sound was just amazing. And then And then, when it got to the point, even in their clubs underground, where like the girls would be just screaming at them, you know, just like screaming at them. Like there was this thing about them, right? That everyone feels like their music is like everyone can feel it and can kind of feel this universalness about it, I guess. Um, but yeah, when they work their ass off, in these clubs, getting paid like no money for 3 years, 2, 3 years. Then, they're trying to get a record contract, and they get rejected, rejected, rejected. Um, they were told by one record company, they were told that whoever was this company screwed up so badly, but they were told, guitar groups are on the way out. So that's like, that's literally like, whoever said that made like the biggest mistake ever. And then they met their producer, George Martin, at EMI, I believe. And he was like, this band is incredible, you know? And the Beatles had a manager who was a fantastic manager named Brian Epstein. He's the one who introduced them to George Martin at EMI. And Brian Epstein was kind of like the secret weapon behind the band, you know, that, you know, and I mean, he was a great businessman, and you need that. Even for the Beatles, you need people who are good businessmen in order to be successful, because otherwise no one's going to even hear about you, even if you are incredibly amazing. So anyway, George Martin, or Brian Epstein, introduces them to George Martin, and George Martin is like, "Oh my God, this is a fucking gold mine." Plus, he really liked their just energy, their charisma, how they interplay with each other, how their interplay, how confident they were, how funny they were. Um, George Martin said, so, like, after they played for music for him for a long time, George Martin said, "Is there any part of this that you don't like?" And then George Harrison goes, "Well, you're Ty for starter." That's such a great comment. And George Martin was like, "These guys are going to be superstars." So then what they do, they've released like one single, which is "Love Me Do" in 1962. That was the only song in 1962 that ever got released. And then George Martin goes, "Why don't you just come into the studio and just we'll record every song that you guys do in your live set. Just come in and we'll do every single song." So they come in one long session from like 10 a.m. to 2 at night, they they play every single song that they did in a row. There was their concert, and that was the "Please Please Me" album. And it's incredible. It starts with "I Saw Her Standing There," which is just an amazing rock song and energy. And it starts with Paul McCartney going 1, 2, 3, fa, like fa. Yeah, he said four, but he like shouts it. And then they just go right through in order. And the first song is like I said, "I Saw Her Standing There." And then, this is an album people don't really. This is like the only album, maybe. Well, this and maybe Beatles for Sale, but I'll get to that later. Where people don't really know the middle stuff, but it's amazing. You go from "I Saw Her Standing There" to the song called "Misery." There's a song called "Chains," which is sung by George, and it's just awesome. And you can hear their new sound, and it's just like unique. And then the most famous thing about this album is, of course, the ending song, "Twist and Shout," which is like one of the best things ever, right? is such an amazing song. In Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that's the song that he does. But just that song, the energy behind, and what was so like great, right, about this song was, actually the whole Please Me album, that day where they did that long session, John Lennon was sick. He had a cold, and you can hear that on that album. And he didn't want to do Twist and Shout to the end. They agreed we don't want to do that until the end because John knew he was going to just tear his voice apart, and then he wouldn't be able to do the other songs. So they did it at the end, and it sounds fantastic. And the cold works, and there's this rawness to that song and this energy. Hi guys, thanks for saying hi. And anyway, there's this energy to it, and it's incredible. It's an incredible song, the energy, and you can hear John just like putting everything into it. So they record the Please Please Me album. It gets released, and like it's awesome. It's awesome, right? It's just like so awesome. And then after that they're playing shows in England. They haven't come to America yet, but they're still playing shows in England, and in Germany. There was their big gig in Hamburg. They were doing shows there all the time. And they're still not famous yet. Like, well, they are famous, but not internationally famous, right? And so then, you go to the next album they recorded, right? Which is called With the Beatles, right? In America, it was called Meet the Beatles, but that's a different album. I'm talking about the original British releases. Their next album was called With the Beatles. And this album is also incredible. Like, it's so good. It is so good. I mean, they're even doing covers a lot in these first two albums, but it doesn't matter. The covers are incredible. They're so good. They're so good. The melodies, just John Lennon and Paul McCartney, their harmonies together. It's like their voice. It's like they were made as people to come together and create harmonies, because their harmonies, it's outstanding. And then of course some of the songs, it was George Harrison also, and they had a 3-part harmony. Anyway, so With the Beatles comes out, and it's incredible. And then they've released singles too. They've released She Loves You. She Loves You, yeah. It's a single. They released some other singles. From Me to You. Ba-da-ba, ba-da-bum, bum, ba. If there's anything that you want, if there's anything I can do, blah, blah, blah. So those are singles, right? They've released those. And they released With the Beatles, right? And in 1963, right? Now, they get internationally famous in 1964, right? Where they go to America and go on the Ed Sullivan Show, which is like going on Jimmy Fallon now, I guess, or going on Stephen Colbert, or one of the big talk shows, right? That's the equivalent. So they go on the Ed Sullivan show in America, and immediately America falls in love with them, and now they're like superstars. And this is, Beatlemania in America, right? Then they released the song also, I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is another just like outstanding song. It's incredible. It's just, the harmonies are made. John Lennon said later, he said, that is a beautiful melody, that song, which it really It really is. I mean, I could listen to that song probably the entire day over and over and over again, and it would be awesome. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. Anyway, I'm not gonna subject you to my singing, but that song is so good. And you're like, where is the bad song? Now, the only Beatles album that you could possibly say is one or two bad songs is their next is oh wait, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes, I was getting ahead of myself. Of course, then they come out with A Hard Day's Night, and A Hard Day's Night is 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 almost as good as you can possibly go. Hard Day's Night was the first album they did all original songs, no covers, right? And it was like it was amazing, right? It was I mean, from the very like that chord at the beginning of Hard Day's Night, bum, like that is an incredible chord, and nobody really even knows how to recreate it. They know it's like an F chord, but no one really knows, right? And then they go into A Hard Day's Night, which is incredible, and then the rest of the songs on the album are incredible. And it's like you keep waiting for them to screw up, and they don't. That whole album is so bright, cheery, loving, joyous. Um, the melodies are amazing, like absolutely amazing. Now you could say the latter half of that album which are the songs that were not in the movie Hard Day's Night, for like starting with the song Anytime at All. But Anytime at All is still a great song, you know? And again, if you want to open up another window, go to YouTube and type in Anytime at All. It's fantastic. Um and just that whole album, it makes you feel so happy. And then of course they made a movie, right? And that movie is fantastic. And their senses of humor are fantastic, and their personalities are you know you can see their personalities, um and it's great. Can't buy me love, everybody tells me so. Can't buy me love, no, 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 no. So now they're just superstars, right? They're on the Ed Sullivan Show. They made a movie. Now they're this is Beatlemania in its height. No, Beatlemania in its prime. And they literally can't go anywhere without just hordes of screaming girls. Okay, but now I'm going to blow your mind, okay? I'm going to blow your mind with the next information. John Lennon later said in his life, looking back on this period, he did an interview where he said the whole clean-cut image of the Beatles is an act. It's an act. And that at night they were doing all the things that all the rock bands do. They were trashing hotel rooms. They were having sex with multiple prostitutes, and like all the stuff that rock stars do in 1963, 64, 62. They were doing this apparently. So this clean cut thing was all for show, and at night they were but even this, I feel like I shouldn't say this because people are going to be like, "No, Ben, don't ruin the Beatles for me." But that's true. Um so Hard Day's Night comes out, the movie comes out. Now, this is what I was going to say earlier. Their next album is the only one where you could say there's like some bad songs particularly. Um it's called Beatles for Sale. John Lennon described it as like a country western album, which it does have that feel to it. But what this album is is it's darker. It doesn't have the pep of Hard Day's Night, and this is because they were absolutely exhausted from their touring schedule, and who could blame them? And that weariness and exhaustion does creep into the album, which is not necessarily something you want in an album. Now, it does have some amazing tracks. That being said, um, it has "I'm a Loser," which is amazing. It has 8 Days a Week, which is also amazing. It has a very beautiful melodic Paul McCartney song, kind of pre-Yesterday, called "I'll Follow the Sun," which is incredible. Um, they do some covers. They do a song called "Kansas City, Hey Hey." They do rock and roll music. However, there is one track on this album that has been said is bad, which is called "Mr. Moonlight." And now the thing is, though, right? When I first heard this song, I was like, "Wow, this is the first bad Beatles song I've ever heard." Right? But I looked it up and I did some information hunting about this song, and what I found out was that it was almost like they themselves knew it was a cheesy song and they were purposely doing it as like a joke. So maybe that's true, but yeah. Now this album though, it kind of grows on you, right? But that's not what a Beatles album really is. A Beatles album is it's amazing from the beginning. So this album is really one where you have to listen to it like a little bit to get into it. And most people agree this is the worst Beatles album. But again, you take one of these songs, just one, and put it on any other band's album, and they're going to be like, that will be the best song they ever do." So the next album they come out with is possibly my favorite album, which turns which is questionable because their next album is called Help, and they make another movie that's a takeoff on like James Bond films, right? And Help. But people don't consider this one of their best albums. But I do. And at times I've been like, this is their best album. This is the album where Paul McCartney does have Yesterday, which is like the most covered song ever, and it's just so beautiful. And it has Help, which John Lennon said later. He said that's one of my favorite songs I did because it was true and I meant it. He literally was asking people for help. And my favorite song on the album is called "You've Gotta Hide Your Love Away," which, hey, you got to hide your love away. And just like that song, it's like so it's John Lennon-y, like kind of darkness, but it's beautiful, you know. And I think he was trying to kind of do what Bob Dylan was doing in that song, but I just love that song. It's awesome. And this whole album, if you listen to it, it really describes kind of being in a relationship with somebody, breaking up, and then going on afterwards. And there's a song, "Another Girl," "For I Have Got Another Girl," which is fantastic. Um and I don't know, this album is great, and I love listening to it all the way through. And it's it's great. Then they around this time they released singles like "Day Tripper" and "We Can Work It Out," which are both masterpieces. um, Now about those songs, "Day Tripper" is probably their most obviously um like like sexual song, right? And drug related, right? Um, when Paul he says she's a big teaser, they meant she's a big, they called it said prick teaser. Paul McCartney said that's what I meant. And the line "she took me half the way there" is probably like she's, having sex with him, but then stops like halfway through. Um, and then "Day Tripper," what they meant by that was that this girl they found, and when I took it took me so long to find out. So they find out that she was just like a tripper on the weekend. So she's like a weekend hippie, is what they call it, when they themselves consider consider themselves full-time hippies. So that was where that came from. But it's just obviously a very sexual and druggy kind of song. And they say she only played one night stands now. That's like obviously overtly sexual. Um and but both of those songs, I mean, Day Tripper, come on. Dun da 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 dun da dun da 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 dun da 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 dun 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 dun. Like, oh, it's so good. What a great guitar song. And then We Can Work It Out. This is what I'm saying. We can do da 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 da. It feels like it's all right. We can work it out. Oh God, it's so good. Life is very short, and there's no time for fussing and fighting. And it's like, oh, I love that. I love the message of that song too. Okay, their next album is like their first like like absolute Mona Lisa masterpiece of an album. It's the album that Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys said. He said, "Oh shit, they already did everything I wanted to do on an album." Now, I have to say this is considered a masterpiece. However, I have some issues with it because it's a pretty misogynistic album. And that kind of rubs me the wrong way. The song Norwegian Wood is on this album, which is incredible. However, this is going to blow your mind. It sounds like a nice, beautiful song about a guy, meeting a girl and love, and then he lights this fire in the fireplace, and it's this beautiful image, and it's like, no, that is not what this song is about. And Paul McCartney has said it, and he said, "Oh, we want people to think it's lighting fire in the fireplace, but no, this is a song about a guy goes home with a girl." The girl sits in bed. They have a conversation till 2. She says it's time for bed, right? So she does not have sex with him. So she's been leading him on. She says, "I have work in the morning," and and she started to laugh. And then John Lennon goes, "I told her I didn't," and went to sleep in the bath. So he's pretty resentful, right, about being led on. And then, when I awoke, she was alone. This bird had flown. Bird means, girl in England. It's like a phrase. And then he goes, "So I lit the fire, isn't it good Norwegian wood?" But what he means is this girl rejected his advances. He's pissed off and he's gonna burn her freaking house down. That's the meaning of this song. And you would never think that because it's so dun da da dun 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 da 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 dun da da da. Like it's beautiful, right? So Rubber Soul, um, that's a beautiful, beautiful song. The song Girl is on it, right? A girl. Right, he's like really fed up with a girl. Now, it sounds like the girl in this song is a terrible person, way too arrogant. There's the line there's the line in Girl um where, when you say she's looking good, she acts as if it's understood. Like she's cool, cool, like, a girl who obviously I'm amazing. Like that, but in a, but this again goes into the misogynistic thing I was talking about, right? So, and then the last song on the album is obviously misogynist. And John Lennon actually said later he doesn't like this song because it's called Run for Your Life. And he's going, "If you do anything bad to me, I'm going to kill you. Like, you better run for your life if you can, little girl. If I catch you, that's the end, little girl." And then he's line later, rub it even more, in case you don't know. He says outright, "This is a sermon. This is a sermon. I mean every word I say." So he literally is saying, "I'm going to kill this girl," right? And then, like, it's like, right. So Rubber Soul it's a mess. It's their first like total Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel ceiling of an album. But I have some issues with that. The misogyny in it can get, you know, to a certain height. So then they come out with the singles around this album was um amazing. Rain was a single they did at this time. And Rain is like it has some amazing drumming by Ringo, and the melody is so cool and great and sweeping. Rain, rain, like it's, and then his message in it is like, when the sun shines or when the sun doesn't shine, it's all a state of mind. And he's like making fun of people in England who complain about the weather all the time. And he's like, no, if it's sunny or if it's raining, it's just this, it's all the same thing. And so I like that message, right? And then the other single was Paperback Writer. And Paperback Writer is just like, oh, it's such a cool song. You can also if you look at Paperback Writer, there's also a cool video about it on YouTube. They're like music video about it. And then the song Paperback Writer, and like, oh god, I kind of wish I could get like the knowledge of the Beatles deleted so I could experience these songs one again as the first time. I mean, in Paperback Writer, the melodies, the harmonies are so great and trippy, but in such a cool way. Paperback Writer, writer, right? It's like, oh god. Okay. Now we move on to the next Beatles album, which is universally seen as their best album. And I thought this for a while myself. Instinctually, it felt like this is their best album. This is the most Beatley album. This is the most like cohesive album. And of course, we're talking about Revolver. Revolver comes out, and John Lennon said later, he said, Rubber Soul is the pot album, Revolver's the LSD album. And you can definitely get that. I mean, it's very trippy, and they've really changed almost entirely from their image, how they were at the beginning, of their career. Now, my favorite song on this album is a song called She Said, She Said. And this song was recorded without Paul McCartney because he'd been angry about something and he left. So it's just John, George, and Ringo. And da da da, da like the guitar part. And she's making me feel like I've never been born. And it goes da na 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 da na na na. I think it's so awesome. And this song was the story behind this song. They're at some fancy Hollywood Hills kind of party, right? And I think Peter Fonda, the actor, was there. And they're tripping on acid. And Peter Fonda goes, I know what it's like to be dead. And John Lennon like freaks out. He's going, why would you say something like that? I'm on acid. I'm getting the hell out of here. Like, now in the song, he goes, he changed it to a girl. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. But in reality, it was a man. It was Peter Fonda. And they had this experience. And he's like, you're making my trip go bad. When I want acid, I don't want to be thinking about things like that. So that song's amazing. Taxman is just a kind of George masterpiece. Just an incredible, a cool song to open the album, and it's like he's upset because they're getting taxed all their money, and it's like he's going, "We're the Beatles. How could we be losing money like this?" But just an amazing song. Then you have Eleanor Rigby, which it's incredible. It just gives you a sense of like, he's look at all the lonely people, and it's like really sad, but he's going, look, there's so many lonely people in the world, right? Which is true. Anyway, incredible song. and the album gets really trippy and really, really trippy and more trippy, and it's just fantastic. And it really is like very acid. Like you can tell they've done a lot of acids, hallucinogen based, and it's the sound, but the sound is so trippy and magical that they managed to make on that album. Now, fun fact too, Rubber Soul and Revolver, why are they called that? Because it's just Rubber Soul is, that's what a record is. It's a rubber soul. Revolver, that's what the record does. It revolves. It's not about a gun, but it does sound cool because it's kind of, you could think it's about a gun, but they just meant like the record is revolving. Um, so I mean, by this point, like they're already going to go down in history. If their career had ended right after Revolver, they would probably still would have gone down in history as the best band ever. But of course, they have to just keep outdoing themselves and outdoing themselves and outdoing themselves. And then their next album is the very famous Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And people say that A Day in the Life, the last song on the album, is the best Beatles song. I wouldn't say that, I don't think, but people say that. Um, and this album is fantastic. Everyone loves the transition, how it goes from this first song, Sergeant Pepper's, to With a Little Help from My Friends. And the transition there is so cool and smooth, and then Ringo, it's a perfect song for Ringo to sing, and I get by with little help from my friends. I'm gonna try with little help for, like, it's such a good song, and it's such a good song for Ringo to sing. Um, and I like this song "Getting Better." You have to admit, it's getting better. It's getting better all the time. And then "Fixing a Hole" is also great. This album was really a Paul McCartney dominated album for the most part. You do have some John Lennon gems, like "For the Benefit of Mr. Kite," which is a great song, so absurd and wild. And John Lennon, the people go, "Where'd you get all this stuff?" And he's like, "There, we saw a poster of the circus, and it literally said all the lyrics in the song. He just wrote down that." And then "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," which is amazing, and everyone thought that stood for LSD, but he was like, "No, it doesn't. It's just my son. I saw a picture that my son did," and he said, John Lennon asked, "What is that?" And his son's reply was, "It's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." And John Lennon said, That's amazing." Now, okay, they repeatedly said many, many times that they did not know that the letters were LSD. Now, probably that's true, but because of how John was kind of like the earliest troll, like his attitude and behavior, I could totally imagine John Lennon and Paul McCartney going, "We're going to make a song, obviously about LSD, that spells out LSD, but then we're going to tell everyone that it's not." Like, you can imagine them doing something like that. Maybe there's like a 10% chance, 90% probably it's not, but so this album is incredible. Now, also, before this album comes out, their manager Brian Epstein dies, unfortunately. Forget how. So John Lennon said after, he said, when Brian Epstein died, I knew we were finished. So you could kind of see Sgt. Pepper's, as people say, it's like the first kind of album where they're kind of thinking about maybe they're going to be ending their band soon, maybe. So now they don't have a manager. But they're so famous, it doesn't matter. I mean, on Revolver, they were so famous. Sgt. Pepper's, they were just unlimited income. Unlimited amount of money they were given to make this album, and they took advantage of the studio, and they had a whole orchestra, and also by this time they weren't touring anymore because they got so sick of not even being able to hear themselves playing because of all the screaming. So they just focused purely on the studio and what can the studio do and what sounds can they make in the studio. Um, so there's this big band effect, really, the whole thing. And um, Fixing a Hole, Getting Better, just outstanding tracks. And then the Sgt. Pepper's Reprise, and then A Day in the Life. And A Day in the Life is is amazing. Hi, Ice Bear. What did I miss? We're up to. I'm just talking about all my knowledge and trivia of the Beatles, and we are up to Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967. So, also put your favorite Beatles album or your favorite Beatles song in the chat. That would be a cool thing to do. But yeah, Sergeant Pepper's, they were given just unlimited income. Or not income, unlimited money. You can do whatever, whatever, you know. So yeah, and then it ends with A Day in the Life, and A Day in the Life is just incredible. And again, that song ends on a chord, right? That song ends, if you remember, it ends on dung, something like that. And that chord too, people don't know how to do that. They have no idea how they made that sound at the end of the album. And they don't. But it's incredible. It's an incredible way to end the album. And then they they did something kind of unique and cheesy and wonderful at the end of the album. So every Day in the Life, first they put a note that can only be heard by dogs that will piss dogs off. And then they recorded a bit of themselves, like they did something that's like a record skipping, which is what it would do at the end of the album. They actually recorded that, and it goes like da, 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 what is it? It's like just there's something at the end like that, like never something da 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 never, and it repeats. It's like never da 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 never da 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 never da 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 da. Yeah, and so Sergeant Pepper's is released, and they knew how good an album it was, and George played it before it was released, but at this Hollywood party because he knew it was like absolutely amazing. However, in later years, Sergeant Pepper's, he said, "There's a few songs that I like, and the rest I hate." So he had albums with problems with this album. And then of course the iconic cover, right? That image is probably the most famous album cover ever. And so this comes out, and also around when this comes out, they just released some of their absolutely best singles, which then appeared on the compilation or the album Magical Mystery Tour, which happened right after Sergeant Pepper's, and this really is like, I mean, I think like Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin or Pete Townsend from the Who or something, they said, okay, we don't really like their music until Magical Mystery Tour. So even the haters back then, they said when Magical Mystery Tour came out, that was when we were hooked. But yeah, I mean, you have the singles came out beforehand, and you have Strawberry Fields Forever, just a beautiful song. They used this instrument at the time called a mellotron, which it's a very early version of just electronic keyboard that can play lots of different sounds, and you would have tape loops, right? And so they use a mellotron, that beautiful thing at the beginning of Strawberry Fields Forever. And John said this was one of his favorite songs that he did also, and it is so melodic and so beautiful. And a fun fact with this song, so they spliced two different takes of it. The first take goes like about for the first minute of the song. And then if you notice, at a certain point, about a minute in, it changes. And that's because they used a different take. Now, the issue was when they used a different take, it was in a different key, right? So the sound engineer said to John Lennon, he said, how am I going to do this different take? It's a different key. And John Lennon said, well, you'll figure it out, right? So if John Lennon says you'll figure it out, you have to do something, right? So what he did was he slowed it down, and that's what you can really hear at a minute into the Strawberry Fields Forever. You can hear that John Lennon's voice has been slowed, and that also created this trippy element to it. So that song is incredible. Now, Penny Lane is obviously incredible, right? It's Paul's answer. He's like, okay, he's going to talk about his childhood. It's Strawberry Fields Forever, a place from his childhood. I'm going to talk about a place from my childhood, Penny Lane, right? Very beautiful song, Penny Lane. Very upbeat song. But I'm going to blow your mind again. So if you listen to the song, right, usually it goes, there beneath the something suburban skies. Okay, so he says that line, the first chorus and the last chorus. In the second chorus, he doesn't say there beneath the blue suburban skies. He goes, for a fish and finger pies in summer, right? So what is this, right? Well, for a fish is fish and chips, which is very popular in England and very tasty thing you can get here in America as well. For a fish and finger pies. What is a finger pie? Well, it is fingering a girl. That's what it means. And Paul McCartney said that he did that, a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the boys back in Liverpool. And again, Paul McCartney, you would not think he has a dirty mind. He's so clean cut. He's smiling. He's the one that the girls liked, right? And he's just doing this very, overtly sexual thing in the middle and getting away with it. So that's very interesting. But then if you go to Magical Mystery Tour, it's a compilation, right? And then you get these other this compilation of singles, but these singles are again incredible. I mean, the most famous one is I Am the Walrus. And this song is great. It starts with I am he as you are he as we are me and we are all together. Now this was something that he experienced on an acid trip, that first part. But then the song I am the Eggman, I am the Walrus, cuckoo cuckoo, and he apparently wrote that just total random nonsense to say kind of fuck you, I guess, or to the people who were trying to analyze all of his songs. But it's great. And in an interview afterwards, this is awesome because George said there was a lot of ego in the Beatles, right? And there probably was, right? But what's amazing is like it's not like, yes, it's ego, but it's also they understood how amazing they were. Right? It's different if someone has an ego with nothing to back it up. But I mean, come on, they knew how great they were, so they had egos that were appropriate to that, right? So John Lennon said in this interview, he said, well, first he said about Magic Mystery. He said, I love Magic Mystery Tour because it's so weird, right? And then he's talking about I Am the Walrus, and he says, okay, I like this song. Obviously, I wrote it, so I like it. But he said, there's lots of little biddies to keep people interested, even 100 years from now. Or not keep people interested, but like so that people in 100 years will still like this. So he knew, right? He knew in 100 years that people will still be listening, and he's right. I mean, it's been, it's not. It's going to be 2060 when it's been 100 years, but it's already been 50 years, right? And like he knew, he was like, in 100 years from now, it's the same as Mozart, right? I feel our word because I never listened to them. LO. No, don't feel whatever. I mean, a lot of people haven't listened to them, but honestly, that's actually great. I Spirit. Like honestly, if I were like when you hear this music for the first time, it's incredible, you know. Uh, But and all on YouTube now, they have all their songs so iconic and classic. Um, and then so yeah, Magical Mystery Tour. I Am the Walrus, which is amazing. Um, All You Need Is Love, which was like the ballad of the hippies in 1967. Um, Baby You're a Rich Man, another trippy song with an amazingly weird lyric where he goes, "You keep all your money in a big brown bag inside a zoo. What a thing to do." Like, what does that mean? I don't know, but it's amazing. Um, so trippy, so weird, and great. The worst thing the Beatles ever did was the movie Magical Mystery Tour. It was awful. It was really awful. Um, that is universally agreed on the worst thing the Beatles ever did. But the album itself will blow your mind. Okay, we're moving to 1968, and they do a few songs for the movie Yellow Submarine, which is an animated film. People love it. I find it a little disturbing, but people love that. John Lennon said it was his favorite Beatles song, album, not song or album, movie. And he said he plays it for his kid, and his kid liked it. And yeah, it is like a children's movie. But they recorded a few different songs just for that album, including All Together Now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I get a little more? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I Love You, which is a great song. They did that. Um, they did Hey Bulldog, which is another awesome song with a great guitar riff. And they released some singles here too. Lady Madonna, they release. Lady Madonna, gonna get your feet. Like, that's an amazing song. And then, this culminates in John Lennon said this is Paul's masterpiece in Hey Jude. And Hey Jude comes out, and that actually is their number one best-selling single of all time. And it's beautiful. It is beautiful. It is and then the 5-minute thing at the end, na 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 na, Hey Jude, that goes on for 5 minutes, and they were told at first, they said nobody, it's not radio friendly, no radio is going to play this. And John Lennon said they will if it's us. It's like such a perfect thing to say. They will if it's us. And they did, and it was on the radio, and it's it makes me happy, that song. It's just mm, it is na 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 na, Hey Jude. I mean, who could not like that song? It's great. It's just mm, I could listen to that on repeat the whole day and just oh, it's so good. Now, a fun fact about this song, I hope it doesn't ruin it for you. However, right before the na 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 na, okay, you can hear John Lennon in the background going, "Fucking hell." Very low, very small. But if you go on YouTube right now, look up Hey Jude, you'll hear the part where they go into the na na na, and then right before that, you'll hear this sound that's like ah ba ba, and it's John Lennon going "fucking hell," and they kept it in there. Oh, it's so good. It is Paul's. John Lennon said that is Paul's masterpiece, and it is. It is. Well, after Yesterday and all the other masterpieces he did, but this song is just great. You can actually go on YouTube, and they had this live taping of it, which is great. And now we are moving into an outstanding piece of work, which is like an amazing mess and hodgepodge of an album, which is the White Album. Their first and only double album, and it is a mess, but it's a beautiful mess because there's all these songs in different styles, and one here, one here, one here, one here. Doesn't It's all not really cohesive, but it has all these little things in it. You know, John Lennon said about "I'm the Walrus," these little bitties in that song. This whole album is like little bitties. Um, but it's just so beautiful. It starts off with "Back in the USSR," which is a completely dated song because the USSR doesn't exist. It's Russia. You know, it's so date. I mean, who else but the Beatles could have a song that is so dated and yet people still love it? You know, it's the Beach Boys ripoff. They're trying to, you know, instead of, they go back in the USSR instead of the USA. So they're kind of ripping on the Beach Boys a little bit, but it's great. And then you have Glass Onion, which is a great song. And just this beautiful hodgepodge. Somewhere in there is Helter Skelter, which is really kind of the first. No, it is. It's like the first punk song. Like it's like pre-punk and heavy. It's such a heavy track. And Paul said they wrote Helter Skelter because he'd heard the Who, the band, and they were doing this dirty stuff. And he was like, "We're gonna make a song that's dirty and rough and more loud than the Who." And that was Helter Skelter. Helter Skelter also, the murderer Charles Manson, he had this insane theory that the Beatles' message through Helter Skelter was to start like a race war. Anyway, that's really, I hate talking about people like that because they're disgusting people, but that's where, Helter's that it got tied in with Charlie Manson. It's a separate thing. But then what else do you have? You have the continuing story of Bungalow Bill. You have Rocky Raccoon. You have Happiness is a Warm Gun, which is incredible. This song is just, it has so many layers, right? And oh god, just thinking about it is great. Now, unfortunately, there's a somewhat decent chance that it is about heroin, which John was in the throes of at this time, unfortunately. Also, he was with Yoko Ono now, and they probably both were doing heroin together, but you know, happiness is a warm gun, the trigger or the needle and the warm, you know, but whatever. Fuck. I don't want to ruin it. It's an amazing song. Now, my favorite song on this album is a track called "Everything." Everyone has something to hide except for me and my monkey. That's just so absurd, but it's such a good. It's. I actually listen to this on repeat. This song. I love it. I love the insane energy in this song. Um, Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, and da da da, come on, and da da da. Uh, Come on, come on. And everybody's got something to hide except for me and my mind. It goes da 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 na na. It's so cool. And then John's like, "Woo! If your inside is out and your outside is in, and your something is in and your inside is out. So come on, dun dun, come on, dun dun. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my da na 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 na." I want to learn how to play that on guitar because I love that thing. Now, this song also though, unfortunately, is probably about heroin because monkey was a slang word for heroin, unfortunately. But it's so good. I love the energy. I actually, that's a song that I drive through LA and I blast that song at maximum volume because I love the energy behind it. Um, Fantastic song. You have Birthday, which is a fantastic song. You have um Good Day Sunshine, which is a fantastic song. Um I actually might be wrong about that. That might be on a different album. Um uh, what else? You have um um even the last song, Good Night. Ringo sings it, and it's beautiful. Um, you have Revolution One. Um, they did 3 versions of this song, Revolution. They did a single, which is probably the one that's most popular, um, where it has a lot of loud guitar, and that's my favorite, Revolution. Not the one on the White Album, but it's the single version. You say you want a revolution, well, but and then on the White Album is Revolution One, which is a slowed down version, which is what John wanted to do with it, but then he said they did it faster for the commercial appeal. But I still love the faster version. And then they go to Revolution 9, which is on this album, which the guy goes number 9. This is like an avant-garde kind of piece of art, sound art that goes on for like 7 minutes, and it's pretty cool, but it creeps me the hell out, and I can't listen to it because it's really creepy. And John was with Yoko at this time, and she was an avant-garde artist, and um, but yeah, and this was really the first album where you could see them wanting to split up because you could see, oh, this is a Paul song now, this is a John song, you know, la da la da yada yada. And then, of course, though, White Album, George has his masterpiece, one of his first real breakthroughs in "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," which is just amazing. And fun fact, the guitar solo was actually Eric Clapton doing the guitar solo. Um, but that song too, that song is it's just "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and it's like, oh God, you know, George really is coming into his own with this song. Um, so this is a giant album. Later, like 50 years later, some critics were going, "Oh, it's not that good," and Paul's response to that was, "Look, it's sold. It's the Beatles' White Album. What do you want?" Again, he knows how amazing it is. He knows this. But he's like, "What are you talking about? It's sold. It's the freaking Beatles' White Album." So, and actually, this album is really just called The Beatles, but because it's a white cover, which they did to contrast the cover for on Sergeant Pepper's, which is a ton of shit. It's a white cover. Um, the earliest versions of the album on the cover was just kind of it was stamped with like a serial number. But then after that, it just says the Beatles and it's white. And I believe they have these records that literally the record itself was white, and that's like that. If you have one of those, it's very rare, and it's worth a lot of money. So yeah, the White Album is just like, it's great. It's this beautiful mess. It's completely uncohesive, and it's just it's like a double album from the Beatles. So how could you go wrong with that? Now, unfortunately, we're moving to the end of their career. Uh, this was after 1968. You go to January, February, March 1969. Now, there is an amazing biography that I just read recently called "And in the End," which every chapter is a month in 1969. So it really goes into very deep detail about the reasons why the Beatles broke up and exactly what was happening in their life at the time. So the Beatles, their last 2 albums which were released, they did Abbey Road, and then what came out was Let It Be. Now, the thing is though, Let It Be, those songs were they did sessions called the Get Back sessions in January, February, March of 1969. So, but because it's January, February, March 1969, Let It Be was recorded before Abbey Road, but it was released after. And the reason for that was that the Beatles all thought that the music on Let It Be was crap. They thought it was crap. They thought it had been recorded terribly. And John Lennon later said of it after it got released in 1970, he said the person who who mixed and mastered this, did an incredible job because he said he took music that was the lousiest, badly recorded stuff. That's what John Lennon said, and somehow managed to turn it into a great Beatles album. I don't think he thought it was the best. People don't really think Let It Be was the best. It's the only album that when it came out, it got like somewhat negative reviews. But yeah, and it came from the Get Back sessions at the beginning of 1969. And you can really hear the Beatles really kind of wanting to break up. But what's crazy is that even though there's all this tension, and John had a bed brought into the studio for Yoko Ono. So that's like, they had even a policy against girlfriends being in the studio or anyone being in the studio besides the Beatles, and John Lennon's clearly breaking that. And then Paul McCartney later said, but you know what? You have to respect, he was completely in love with this woman, and you have to respect that. But so that was happening. Actually, I think that had been happening since the White Album. But yeah, the Get Back sessions. Let It Be obviously is an incredible song. Amazing. Paul's best song, arguably, after Hey Jude. You have I Dig a Pony, which is great. You have Two of Us. I love that song. It's almost like a folk song. Two of us standing nowhere, doing something in the sun. That's such a good song. You have George's amazing song, I Mean Mine, which is great. John Lennon absolutely hated it. You know, but it's great. It's a great George song. You have Let It Be. You have Get Back. Get back to where you once belonged. Donna, get back. And then you have their single that wasn't on Let It Be, but it's amazing. Don't Let Me Down. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. And of course, this all culminated in a concert on the roof of their studio. They had a concert on the roof where they did a lot of these songs from Let It Be. And some people came up, and everyone around was looking up because they were like, "Oh my God, the Beatles!" Right? And this was like really their first live appearance since like Revolver in '66. So they do this impromptu album just on the roof. They do all these songs, and this is on YouTube too. You can find this and look up "Don't Let Me Down." That's just when he sings that. There's this power energy. He's singing and he goes, "I'm in love for the first time. Don't you know it's gonna last? It's a love that lasts forever. It's a love that has no past." And it's like he's singing about Yoko, obviously, but he's so in love, right? And it's just beautiful. They did a song called "Across the Universe," which is beautiful. Now, the thing about this album, the fun fact, they have a song called "The Long and Winding Road." Now, people love this song. It's very melodic. They have a whole orchestra over it. But Paul McCartney hated that. The guy who mixed all this stuff afterwards added the orchestra without talking to Paul, and Paul was outraged by it. Now, the reason that happened, that the guy put on the full orchestra on that song, was because John was playing the bass, and John was not the bassist, Paul McCartney, but John was. On top of it, he wasn't just playing a normal 4-string bass, he was playing the Fender 6, which was a 6-string bass. So he's not even a bass player, but he's already playing a 6-string bass, and his bass playing is atrociously awful. It is terrible. You can look up this thing that says all the mistakes that he makes on the bass. It is the worst, one of the worst bass tracks, bass playing on maybe any album ever. He's absolutely a terrible bass player. And so the guy who mixed it, he put on this orchestra to hide that. So he was hiding how terrible the bass was. on that song. Also, Paul McCartney or someone thought that maybe the reason for that was that John might even have been like subconsciously trying to ruin it for Paul because they were having a lot of tension at that time, right? So they do the Get Back sessions. At that time, they were like, those songs were crap. They're probably never going to be released. And they do that. And months go by, and there's this more and more friction. Now, right, people think, why did the Beatles break up? Well, Yoko was and all this. And that is a little bit true to an extent. But, and what you learn in this biography that I read, and in the end, that Brian Epstein had died, their manager, in like 67, right? He had died. So they needed a new manager. And they eventually went with this guy named Alan Klein. It might not be Alan, but his last name was Klein, who was really the Harvey Weinstein of his time. You know, in that not necessarily, he was never nothing sexual with women and all that, but he was a gigantic asshole and very blatant and screaming at people and yada yada yada. However, how John Lennon saw it, right? Yes, he's an ass, but he gets stuff done, right? And that's what you need. It doesn't matter if he's an asshole. He's going to help us get stuff done, right? Which really should be the mentality, in a workplace environment, because you're just trying to do things, and if it's anything to get stuff done, right? So John Lennon and George and Ringo were on board with Alan Klein, who also was the manager of the Rolling Stones at the time. So they were like on board. We were like, this guy's going to get us money. A lot. They were actually losing a lot of money because of bad business dealings. They weren't multimillionaires. They were millionaires or almost millionaires. And of course, a millionaire back then, because of inflation, is worth a lot more than a millionaire now. But they weren't like wildly rich like how Paul and Ringo are today. They weren't. So they wanted Alan Klein because he's this ruthless businessman who is saying we're gonna you're gonna get what the Beatles should be getting when it comes to money. And John also, he did something pretty good. He asked about Yoko Ono and her songs to John Lennon. So he immediately was like doing this thing where he's like, I respect Yoko Ono, right, as an artist on her own, which obviously is going to make John Lennon, feel great. But anyway, why I'm bringing this all up is that George, Ringo, and John were on board with this new manager. And Paul McCartney was not. He was like, F this guy, I'm not working with him, he's crazy. And he was going against the other three. So this was also the thing that broke them up, probably just as much contributing to it as Yoko Ono. But Paul was like, I am not working with this guy, Alan Klein, and the other three were like, we are. And this was creating a giant rift. Now, what happens before they start doing Abbey Road? This story I'm about to tell you, this is the story of the best cold call in history. Like cold call, a salesman cold calling someone. And it's a really inspirational story for any salesman, for anyone who cold calls, for anyone who tries to sell anything. So, this is the story. This, again, is going to blow your freaking mind. Okay. So, there was going to be this concert in Toronto, in Canada, where there was going to be this concert in Toronto, in Canada, and this was 24 hours before the concert was going to happen. So, I love this story. So, this promoter cold calls John Lennon in England, and he's in Toronto, the cold caller. And it gets picked up by some dude, the dude who John Lennon has hired to, be the, the one to take all these random cold calls and requests. He's like a screener, right? So the screener picks up, starts scribbling down details like concert Toronto, Chuck Berry, right? All these 50s guitar players that John Lennon, idolized. And John Lennon heard these people are going to be like Chuck Berry, you know, and he grabbed the phone away from his screener and asked information. He was like, yes, who's going to be there? Yes, yes, this is great. And he said, yes, I'm going to do this. I mean, this would be like, I'm an actor, right? This would be like if I were to cold call Leonardo DiCaprio and be like, Leo, come be in my movie tomorrow. And he was like, yes. Like, it's just so inspirational. Who knows what's going to happen as a result of a cold call? Possibly something like this. But the story gets better. So, the story gets better. But wait, there's more. So, John Lennon agrees to do this. And he immediately starts putting together a band that's not the Beatles for this one concert. He calls Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton's going to do it. He had heard this drummer about a week ago, this 20-year-old drummer in England at the time. He had heard him like a week ago at a concert, and the guy's 20 years old. John Lennon calls this 20-year-old, 8-year-old, and is like, 20-year-old, and says, do you want to be the drummer in my new band? And obviously he said yes, but then it's even more great is that by saying yes and doing this, he was going to miss the concert that his current band was scheduled to do. And this current band was like, you have to work with us. You have to do this concert. And he was just like, dude, John Lennon has just invited me into his band. I obviously have to do it. He's like this 20-year-old drummer. So, but then what happens, right? This is, again, unbelievable. So, John Lennon goes to sleep that night, right? Wakes up again in a more sober state of mind and says, I'm not doing this concert, and calls the guy again. And he doesn't get through to him, but he says, give him a message. We're not going to do it anymore. Meanwhile, Eric Clapton, this 20-year-old drummer, are already at the airport. Now, then what happens is the promoter, right, calls Eric Clapton and goes, please, please help me to get John Lennon back, because if he doesn't, I'm going to lose my career, and I'm going to have to just go to John Lennon's house and sleep outside of it because I'll be ruined. So Eric Clapton calls John Lennon and gets pissed at him. He goes, you're such a diva. You have so much ego from the Beatles that you think you can just play people like this and screw you, screw you, screw you, screw you. And this is Eric Clapton saying to John Lennon this. He called him, I think he said, you're grandstanding, or something like that. You're rock god grandstanding. And after this call from Eric Clapton, John eventually said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then he goes to the airport, and it's an overnight flight to Toronto. And this whole flight, he was so nervous. He was freaking out because he was like, how would you feel if you were been in a band? And this is like the first band outside of the Beatles. And he's freaking out. Then they get to Toronto, and then backstage, of course, John's freaking out again. And then he has, there's people who are like, we got to get him drugs, right? So that he stops freaking out. I forget if he actually was on the drugs, but then they did this concert, and you can get it. It's like live in Toronto or something. And it's with this makeshift band that John put together in like 24 hours and flew from England to Toronto that same day. And it's great. It has some John Lennon classics like the song Cold Turkey. And a few other like his songs that he was developing that were going to be in his solo career. in the 70s. I think he did Give Peace a Chance also, which is a great anti-war, song. And yes, by doing this, he has now done the first concert with a band other than the Beatles. So, just I love the guy who just cold calls John Lennon and gets him to eventually come in 24 hours, fly across the ocean for one show. It's just a ridiculous story, and it gives me hope whenever I do a cold call, because who knows? Who knows? Yes, you could get rejected 500 times, but then the 501st time, it could be something like this. You never know. Okay, after this, we're in mid 1969, and they're starting to make the songs that are going to be on the Abbey Road album. And Paul got George Martin again. He said, "We want to do an album like in the old days, right? Let's do that again." And George Martin says, "I'll do it, but you have to get John Lennon to approve it as well." And John Lennon did, and the songs and this is like a really heavy album, which is reflecting kind of the change in music at the end of the 60s and 70s, which is, you know, turning into like Led Zeppelin and all that kind of stuff. So this is a pretty heavy album, but it's a total masterpiece. Of course, the cover with them crossing the street, and that zebra crossing is incredible. They actually, though, about the title, they were thinking they were like, what should we call this album? And one of the ideas was because someone who they're working with always smoked these cigarettes called Everest cigarettes. They were like, we should go to Nepal and go to Mount Everest, and we should call the album Everest, and you should have us, you know, in front of Mount Everest with a picture. And then they thought about it more, and they were like, we really don't want to go to Nepal for one picture. And then Ringo or someone, these Ringo or Paul was just like, wait, let's just go outside and shoot it right outside. That seems a lot better than going to Nepal. So that's where that came from. They just called it Abbey Road. And the song, Come Together, he goes like this, do 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 do. He come on flat top. Now, whenever I heard the lyrics, come together right now over me, I know logically it's about, coming together as one, as people. But every time I think of that, I think about people, being sexual, right? Like that. And I thought, oh, that's only me, right? But John Lennon apparently, of course he knew this, right? I didn't think so, but it's like, of course, and he liked it. He liked the double entendre with the sexual thing. So that was purposeful. And then you have two songs by George Harrison, which were songs that are so good that Paul McCartney remarked. He said George now is on the level of us. He's writing songs that are just as good as me and John Lennon's songs are, because he comes out with something which is one of the most beautiful love ballads ever, if not the best. Something in the way she moves me, right? And then you have Here Comes the Sun, which is an amazing song. Here comes the sun, da 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 da. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. And then, but then this whole album is just. And then, oh darling, can't you hear? Like that song is fantastic and beautiful, and it's great, and it really is the Beatles' swan song, because they all kind of knew that they were done right after this. So, and then of course, probably the best, or at least top five rock songs ever. I Want You, She's So Heavy. It's just, I want you, dun dun dun. I want you so bad, it's driving me mad. And it just goes on for like 8 minutes. I want you so bad. And that's John Lennon again talking about Yoko Ono, but that song is so great. It's so powerful. It's so melodic. I want you, dun dun dun. I want you so bad, dun 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 dun. I want you. Oh, it's such a oh, and the whole album is amazing. And they had this medley on the back with like bits of songs with like she came in through the bathroom window, and this medley, and then their final line, which is like their final line to everyone. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And it's like, what a beautiful message for their last album, their last, yeah. Now, around this time, too, I think actually a little bit before Abbey Road came out, people thought Paul broke up the Beatles, but no. They had a meeting, and John said what happened in this meeting was Paul kept on saying we want to do this album, and John was saying no to every single thing he said, and so he eventually just had to say it, and then he said, "I think you're daft," to Paul McCartney, and the band's over. I'm leaving the group, and that was it, and and then that was it. That's how it ended, and then their solo careers happened. In my opinion, John Lennon was the best solo artist. Paul McCartney would be next, and I haven't actually heard Ringo. George, no, George is Paul McCartney. He had a triple album called All Things Must Pass, which has My Sweet Lord on it. Oh my Lord, my sweet Lord, and it's did solo stuff. Um, Paul McCartney's first solo album has "Baby, I'm amazed at the way you've loved me." Baby, I'm amazed. Um, and John Lennon had his song called "God," where he goes, "God is a concept for which we measure our pain," and then eventually, a couple years later, he had "Imagine," which is obviously just the most beautiful thing ever, and that's what happened. And then in 1970, the person who mixed "Let It Be," they released "Let It Be," um, which was a very great album, sounding wise. And that's it. And that's when they broke up. And many times people try to get them back together again, and they never did. And one time in like the 70s, Paul and John were hanging out, and they were watching Saturday Night Live, and the head guy from Saturday Night Live was like, "We will give the Beatles, $50,000 to come here right now and perform," as like a joke. He said that, but then Paul McCartney and John actually were watching this, and they actually considered it because they were filming SNL like 2 blocks away. But then they were like, "No, we're not going to do that." And they never got back together again. They never did a concert with each other again. Um, and then, unfortunately, the saddest part about the Beatles, obviously, is how John died. And every time I think about this idiot who killed John Lennon just to be famous, it makes me want to kill him. Like, just so senseless, so crazy, so senseless. Just a random psychopath who was like, "I'm going to kill John Lennon." And it's just, ugh, and it makes me feel terrible. Like, what if he'd still been alive today? Think about what he could have done, or what the songs, or you just feel so awful. He was just taken from this earth by this random psychopath. Now, what I do like is the fact that this guy has gotten parole hearings constantly, and Yoko Ono has always counseled them on counsel and been like, "You cannot give this guy parole ever," and he hasn't. He's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. But Jesus, the way John Lennon was killed. So he went off to record this album with Yoko. He comes back. This guy asked him for his autograph. He's going into his hotel room with Yoko Ono. And then this guy goes, "Mr. Lennon," and goes into a combat stance and shoots him 5 times in the heart. And it's just, that was it. And it's incredibly sad, and what a terrible way to go. And ugh, it's just awful, you know. And this guy does deserve to be in jail forever, and he will. Um, so that's it. I'm clearly getting tired. That's my Beatles information, and if you have any questions, give me a comment. Um, I already made a video about this also, but I'm really strongly considering going to India and doing some videos there because most of my viewers are from India. But if I do that, viewers, you have to watch it. You have to watch it. I have to make my investment back on the flight there and the hotels. I have to, and I want to ideally make more than that back. But you subscribers, you guys have to watch it if I do it. But that's it. The Beatles are amazing. They're the best thing ever. And like I said, if you have any questions or anything like that, put it in the comments. And that's it. Have a good one.